È così sottile che non riesco neanche a metterla a fuoco.
At just 0.7 millimeters thick, this is not the Wagyu meat you know. This is Wagyu guanciale, an Italian-style cold cut made from Japanese Wagyu by the Italian company Meat Japan.
Magari uno pensa al salume, a qualcosa di un po' banale, in realtà sono davvero delle cose speciali. Un contenuto di acido oleico veramente paragonabile a quello dell'olio extravergine d'oliva.
Wagyu is all about small bites, really savoring the meat, whereas Italian cold cuts are bold, thick, and they're often eaten in a sandwich. So what happens when you combine the two and you give Japanese Wagyu the Italian daily treatment? What does it taste like and how do you even eat it? That's what we're going to find out today.
Compared to our normal bresaola, if you think about it, is the total opposite. Why? A bresaola must be lean. No fat. If you see even a little grain of fat, you're like, it's gonna be tough. Why? Because in normal cows, that line of fat could be a hard fat. In our case, the more the merrier.
Paolo is one of the 3 founders of Meat Japan, the Italian branch of historic butchery shop Ginkakuji Onishi in Kyoto, Japan. But they don't stop at importing the Wagyu. In 2022, they started making cold cuts with it, Italian style.
E neanche il pata negra alla fine e la monde beiota che sono pensati come proprio le charcuterie più marezzate del mondo riescono a fare questo.
Meat Japan makes 4 cold cuts: guanciale, bresaola, salame, and seasonally lardo. They are all cured with sea salt, aromatic herbs, and spices. Guanciale is also smoked, but not all of them come from the same cuts of meat as their Italian counterparts.
The guanciale we do with the caps of the ribeye, and we look for parts that are like flat and have a bit of fat. Why? Because I think that that fat that is usually discarded in any meat of the world is the signature of the greatness. This cut doesn't exist. It's not normally used to make hams, but in Wagyu you can, because that part would be on the tougher side, but for us, it's buttery almost. And then other cuts we use from the posterior part of the animal, and from the back of the animal, the bottom round and other parts, and top round and knuckle and so on.
Compared to Italian cold cuts, the marbling on these is undeniably exceptional, but is actually not what Paolo is after.
There are a few indicators of high-quality Wagyu meat. One of the most common ones is A5, where A stands for the yield of lean meat per carcass and 5 is the highest meat quality, including the marbling. To qualify as A5, build and preserve that intramuscular fat, cattle are raised or fattened for 2 to 3 years. The sweet spot is 28 to 32 months, but Meat Japan's Wagyu, it can live up to 15 years.
A5 is the last thing we consider. We select only mother cows that have been selected due to pure genetics and best genetics for reproduction. Now, in Japan historically, they don't have a history of old cow farming. Old cow is just an old cow. Why? The marbling is low. The market, you want A5 always, but an old cow doesn't have that marbling structure.
Instead of that marbling, what these old cows called Juku have are high levels of unsaturated fatty acids, primarily oleic acid, making it similar to extra virgin olive oil. This is achieved by a special feeding program consisting of fermented food, leftovers from the food industry.
You have fermented soy sauce. When you ferment soy sauce, you have like the leftover of the seeds that you can get. And then when you make tofu, you have the okara, which is the leftover of tofu making. Miso the same. We give them soba, the noodles made of buckwheat, normal udon and sweet potato. We inoculate with koji and we let ferment together with rice straw for up to 3 weeks. And we add also a bit of linseed oil. We have a proven reduction of methane production of 60%. The digestion is smoother. They ferment less in their stomach. Everything is pre-fermented outside of their stomach. And this certainly contributes to the taste. This beautiful, steaky, meaty taste, which is balanced by the fattiness that you know.
These unsaturated fatty acids give these cold cuts a melting point of 9.5 to 10 degrees Celsius.
Premium Matsusaka Wagyu, it's praised for its melting point at 12 degrees Celsius.
Why should we chuck like such a beautiful genetic? There must be a way, because they got the idea from Spain and from the tradition of Europe of the vacca vieja. Well, there is this concept of dry age, but funny, my farmer, they said, but why do you dry age beef when we have dry aged for you alive for 15 years? We dry age it alive, we just make it old.
Questo non fa, ha troppo grasso.
Chef Itoshi has been working with Paolo for the last 5 years. Originally from Tokyo, he opened his restaurant in Saronno, Italy, near Milan, where he happened to find Paolo and Meat Japan's offices by chance. He now incorporates these cold cuts in his recipes.
Bucce di zucca, umido con zucchero di canna e salsa di soia e zenzero. Qui c'è timbalo di uova, tamago e tonno rosso mediterraneo, soba, spaghetti grano saraceno, marinato con aceto di riso e sesamo nero.
Quindi gambero rosso e guanciale di Wagyu. Il grasso di manzo che condisce il grasso marino.
Wow, cioè dei sapori completamente diversi rispetto al pezzo di guanciale.
Lo senti questo grasso che senti in bocca?
sempre.
Come se avessi bevuto un bicchierino di olio d'oliva. È la firma solo delle grandi Wagyu.
È come l'olio d'oliva, ti lascia una bocca completamente asciutta.
Sukiyaki modo nostro, sotto troverete diaframma in umido con lo zenzero, cipolla. Poi abbiamo guanciale di Wagyu e bresaola di Wagyu.
Stesso animale, due utilizzi diversi, ma uno aiuta l'altro.
C'è il grasso del salume, il grasso della carne, che è caldo, volgente, invece il grasso del salume è oleoso.
Il nostro salame con la zucca.
Zucca, sì.
Questo è il tipo di fiore che vorrei ricevere ogni settimana.
Dolce salato.
Oh, sì.
Wow,
Questo è mondiale.
veramente buono.
Perché io il salame mangiato così non l'ho mai assaggiato. The concept there is to use the whole carcass. I cannot afford to import the whole carcass from my farmer and ask him just for the noble cuts. We're not gonna leave them with an issue and just get the nice parts. We had no desire to create something expensive, and the point is, the slices must be so thin that a slice is gonna be 2 to 5 grams. After 4 slices, 20 grams is more than enough. So let's say it's 1,000 quid per kilo. 20 grams is gonna be 20 quid.
There are around 100 restaurants in Europe serving these Wagyu cold cuts. I am so lucky to have one close to home. Japanese restaurant Juku in Nochi, Puglia.
Funzionano così bene perché sono riusciti a trovare un ottimo equilibrio di salatura e di stagionatura che permette di apprezzare al meglio quelle che sono le qualità già di una carne eccellente che è la Wagyu. La complessità e la completezza di un gusto che va dal sapido al morbido, al grasso, allo speziato, che si unisce e crea davvero una magia in bocca.
So our question was, can you turn Wagyu into Italian cold cuts? Yes, you can, but you have to completely surrender the way that you eat cold cuts the Italian way and also the Japanese way. What I think is that the chefs here have created a brand new cuisine, one that is neither Italian nor Japanese, but one that is truly constructed so that these ingredients can shine in their own light. And I think they have truly succeeded.
Luca, prego.
Quello è bello impegnativo.
Come devo fare? 0,7 mm.
The fact that something so beefy, meaty, which connects me to the word of salt and pepper, takes you back to vanilla, chocolate, and hazelnut, and all of these tastes. So much so that one of my customers asked us for the pure melted tallow and created a panettone, substituting completely the butter inside the panettone, and it's amazing. It's like salted caramel. It's incredible. So you see, it's once you stop looking at it as made, but you respect the process that's behind, and you learn from the Japanese that you only eat 100 grams, but every 2 days.
Yeah, not the whole panettone.
Not the whole panettone. Well, I can't say I've not done it, but I have learned from my mistakes.
Okay.